those who can hear it, the sound means death. America is on the brink of annihilation. An invading army is at the doorstep of one of the country's largest cities. Its capital has been ravaged, its defenses shattered. Only one thing stands between the enemy force and the nation's destruction: the will of 15,000 men and women determined to defeat America's first invasion. The War of 1812 was a strange and at times an illogical affair. Its reasoning was muddled, its execution mismanaged. It was named for 1 year, but took nearly 3 to fight. Its main cause was no longer a factor before the first shot was fired, and its most famous battle was fought after the peace treaty was signed. Despite these dubious distinctions, the war played a crucial role in establishing America's direction and identity. This second war for independence inspired the national anthem and allowed founding fathers to make way for a new generation of common men with uncommon courage who would lead the nation to its manifest destiny.
War of 1812 is important because it gave the United States a new standing in the world. It was 30 years after the American Revolution, and now the Americans had a chance to make a statement to the world and to show that they were truly independent.
The War of 1812 is a defining moment for this country. It's the first war, the real big war since the Revolutionary War. Is the country going to survive the test of endurance, resilience, determination, unity?
It is the story of a childish nation, which, but for the grace of God and a few soldiers, sailors, Marines, almost never has the chance to reach maturity.
The War of 1812 is a story as much about a nation in conflict with itself as it is a clash of countries. Early 19th century America is a loose association of scattered states, bordered by a vast wilderness to the west and miles of ocean to its east. Isolated communities are surrounded by uncharted and hostile territory. Americans are intertwined by one thread: shipping.
We think of farmers and pioneers as only growing things for their own consumption, but Americans were deeply involved in commerce. Even as farmers, one of the largest employers in this time was the maritime trades, shipbuilding, serving as sailors. This was a huge building block of our economy.
But for most of the decade, that way of life has been on the brink of extinction. Great Britain has continually violated America's shipping rights on the high seas. At the top of a growing list of grievances, impressment of Americans by the British Navy.
The British at this time are fighting an important war against Napoleonic France, and in order to fight this war, they need manpower for the Royal Navy. So they're stopping American ships on the high seas and forcing Americans to serve in the Navy.
There were thousands of British sailors had deserted to the American Merchant Marine for better pay and conditions, and many of them take out citizenship. Britain does not recognize the right of any of its citizens to renounce nationality, and so they reply with the blunt instrument of their fearsome 1,000-ship navy.
In 1807, then-President Thomas Jefferson had urged Congress to pass the Embargo Act, a law forbidding foreign commerce. But it backfired, hurting U.S. ports more than it did British trade. The act was repealed, and the impressments continued.
In a 6-year period leading up to 1810, they forcibly haul off about 5,000 sailors from American ships. About 1,300 of these are later found to have been born in America. So you can imagine what this did to the national her feeling.
But impressment reflects a more extensive and dangerous tension between the two countries, something that never really ended after the Revolutionary War.
Some of the merchants in the Northeast looked to the British as their great friends in commerce, but other Americans are very aware of a sense of animosity that lasts for decades between the two countries. And we know that the British are very eager to maintain some control in the Mississippi Valley. They are inciting the Indians, they're aiding them, and American settlers feel the British are the reason that they're being attacked by the Indians.
The rising tide of resentment was about to become a maelstrom, and at its center was a man who realizes that war is quickly becoming all but inevitable. At just 5 feet 4 inches tall and only 100 pounds, a pygmy as one political foe described him, President James Madison is a slight man, but he is also the towering intellect among the Founding Fathers and the architect of the Constitution.
Madison is a complex guy. He is not very impressive physically, short, he's known as Little Jemmy, but he's got a giant of a brain. This is really one of the most brilliant men on the stage in America at the time. But if you met him, you would think, kind of a cold fish. And I think maybe today we'd call him kind of nerdy, but he turns out to be a pretty capable president.
But on June 1st, 1812, Madison will put that sacred document through a new and dangerous trial. This unlikely commander-in-chief will become the first president to ask Congress to declare war. In his message to Congress, President Madison lists the grievances justifying his call for war against Great Britain. They include interfering with trade on the high seas and inciting Indian attacks on the frontier. But the issue that stirs the most outrage tops Madison's list.
British ships have continually violated the American flag on the Great Highway of Nations and have seized and carried off persons sailing under its protection. They spill American blood within the waters under our territorial control.
But not everyone joins the battle cry of the war hawks. What had started as a clear injustice becomes bogged down in economic and political interests. Madison's conviction reveals a deep schism in a young America. Regions with conflicting interests are about to line up on both sides of the issue, with Madison caught in the crosshairs.
Madison thought that the main political problem was the opposition to the war in New England. New England opposed the war as they had opposed all of the commercial restrictions that had gone on for 5 or 10 years because they were especially harmful to it economically.
Congressmen from New England and members of the opposition Federalist Party argue that this war would threaten their seaport-based livelihood. They accuse the president of embroiling the U.S. in a pointless and costly conflict. Despite the chaos that grips Washington, on June 18, 1812, Congress acts on the president's request. Every Federalist casts a nay vote, but Mr. Madison gets his war. For many, it still remains an unpopular cause. Days later, demonstrators clash in the streets of Baltimore. Dozens are killed or injured. But for Madison, there is no turning back. He realizes the issue of impressment is just the beginning of what could be a reconquest of the young nation. The decision to go to war is a battle for the soul of America itself.
Madison felt, many did, that if we lost, we would lose independence. And the peace terms that Britain later proposed for the war when they thought they were winning indicated that they would reclaim American territory.
Ironically, the conflict might have been avoided altogether if communication had been quicker. 2 days before Congress votes to go to war, Great Britain revokes the law authorizing impressment, thus eliminating America's main grievance. But by the time the news reaches Washington several weeks later, it is too late. The United States has entered its First World War. Despite their militant fervor, the war hawks and